a wonderful candidate tonight, Donna Imam, and she is running in Texas District 31. I want to start talking tonight a little bit about my own experience of Texas. You might know I was born and raised there. And you know, it's so funny. I feel like sometimes I miss my calling not being an American history teacher, because I think history is not only fascinating, but there is so much to learn. And so there's a conversation we need to have about Texas, and a conversation that's big, that's going on right now, but that many people in other parts of the country might not know about. When I was a child, Texas was decidedly Democratic. The South was decidedly Democratic. Admittedly, there were a lot of very conservative Democrats, but it was Democrats. When Lyndon Johnson signed the Civil Rights Act in 1964, and then the Voting Rights Act in 1965. After he signed, he said, "We just lost the South for a generation." He knew there were going to be some very, very angry people in the South. But I remind you, he said we were going to lose it for a generation. He didn't say we were going to lose it for 40 years. For whatever reason, a lot of officialdom within the Democratic Party pretty much surrendered a lot of the South, and certainly threw up their hands in a state like Texas when it became so overwhelmingly red. That has now begun to change. And as they say in politics, Texas is in play. Beto O'Rourke came very close to winning his Senate seat there, didn't quite make it, but he came really close, much closer than a Democrat has made it in a long time. And here at the Progressive Candidate Summit, we have had, I'm happy to say, 3 different Democratic candidates, progressive Democrats, not just Democrats, but progressive candidates who have won their primaries and are well on their way to winning these seats. They need our help, but they can do it. Mike Siegel, you might remember my interview with Mike Siegel. Last night, we talked to Julie Oliver, and tonight, Donna Imam. All of those people, by the way, have part of their districts in Austin. Something you may or may not know about Texas, but this is also true in many states. The big 3 cities, Austin, Houston, and Dallas, they are blue. The state, when it's red, is red because of those rural districts. So Mike Siegel, Julie Oliver, and Donna Imam all share parts of, well, they don't share, but they are all in different parts of Austin. Donna Imam, you know, as I was saying last night, we're talking here about 2 starkly different visions of America. With Trump as president, and when these candidates are running against big Trump allies, that's what you're talking about here. You're talking about Donna or Trump's vision of America. And Donna's opponent, who is a gentleman named John Carter, just to give you an example, he's had 9 terms in office. He's been there since 2003. Hello, isn't that long enough? And Trump has endorsed him. He took campaign out. For those of you who are upset about the private prison industrial complex, as you should be, let me give you an example. This is how it happens. Carter has taken campaign contributions from private prison corporation CoreCivic. I want to be clear here. Private prison should not exist. Period. End of story. We should not be making profit off human suffering. In August, CoreCivic was given a $260 million government contract to run a women's detention center with a history of sexual abuse right here in this district that we're talking about tonight. While millions of Texans lost jobs, Carter did not vote for the HEROES Act to help the unemployed. We have no direct cash relief to millions and millions and millions of people going through this pandemic, as they do in every other advanced country. The HEROES Act, of course, would have helped unemployed Texans and small businesses. So in lockstep with Trump, Carter also denied funds for the U.S. Postal Service. Now, we can't just bitch about these things. We can't just whine. We can't just complain. And the last thing we can afford to do is just get cynical and talk about how we hate them. No, that's not what we need to do. We need to use the tools of democracy and replace them. Now, this is a big deal, this race, Donna Imam, who you're about to meet, because Donna, wasn't supposed to get as far as she's gotten, and she's very, very close. That's why we're doing these episodes, because I hope, as you've heard me say before, I hope you have your credit card out. I hope even if you give $5, because at votefordonna.com, you'll see the donate button, and this is the deal. Thousands of people watch these. If everybody who is inspired by Donna tonight and goes, yeah, she's the type of person we need there, we'll give even $5, $10, whatever it works for you. Sometimes I think people think, well, I can't give much, so it wouldn't make a difference. But that's how democracy should work. We all know we need public funding for federal campaigns, but you know what? We don't have it yet. So right now, we have to get this woman over the line with our help. Donna is a computer engineer. Now, I want to point out something. The House of Representatives was called by the founders the People's House. They saw it as being filled with the shoemakers and the farmers and the people of the United States. We know that there were limits to who they really consider the people of the United States, but still the template is there. So things like people work last night when we were talking to Julie, and she has worked with preventing lead poisoning. No, that was Cara Eastman last night. So Julie was the night before. Cara Eastman from Nebraska was last night. She works with a nonprofit that has to do with removing lead poisoning from places where children are. And Donna Imam, a computer engineer. The House of Representatives is so filled with lawyers and businessmen. Lawyers and businessmen, lovely people, but hello, can we have we should have the kind of diversity that is represented by the kinds of people that we've talked about here and talked with here at the Progressive Candidate Summit. So you got the background to join me in welcoming the very delightful, very brave, very courageous, and very powerful Donna Imam. Donna, welcome. Hi, how are you? Oh, we need you to unmute yourself. Hi, how are you?
How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. So Donna, begin by telling people your background, where you were born, where you're from, and also what got you to the point where you said, I'm going to run for Congress?
Yeah, first of all, thank you so much for having me. I would love to tell everybody about this exciting race, right? Here's my background. I have no political background. I have never ran for office. I grew up around the world and came to the United States as a teenager.
Wait, you grew up around the world. What does that mean? Where were you born?
I was born in South Asia, and then I grew up, most of my childhood was in New Zealand. And then I came to the United States as a teenager and went to school in Indiana at Trine University in Angola, Indiana, which is a rural town, and at the time had less than 6,000 population. It's a small engineering college.
I want you to slow down because I'm already really fascinated by this. You said South Asia, you were born in India?
In Dhaka, which is in Bangladesh.
Wow. You know, everybody, I want you all to be very clear about this. You know, once somebody is in Congress, they are voting on issues that have to do with international policy. And I think we need more people. You know, I had a very close friend, the late Walter Capps, and he was elected to Congress from Santa Barbara, California, I think in 1990, either in 1992 or 1994. And I remember he told me how very disturbing it was to him that at the initial event that they had welcoming all the new Congress members, he couldn't believe how many of them were getting their passports for the first time. That's very dangerous. You know, too many people who make international policy in the United States have not traveled. So the idea of someone like yourself who was born in South Asia and then lived in New Zealand, everybody's all about the prime minister there now. And then you came here when you were in high school, right? And you settled in Indiana, right?
Yeah.
Well, Middle America as you can get. Okay, so go on.
University, yeah. So, you know, I moved to Austin about 14, 15 years ago, and I moved here, you know, to work in the tech industry as an engineer. But in my very first job out of school, very early on in my career, every single assembly worker at my company, I was a research and development engineer, was laid off. And every single one of them had, you know, no job retraining options. Many of them never worked a day in their life again. And that has always left a huge, profound impact on me. So throughout my career,
Donna, what happened to them?
All their jobs were moved to Mexico. I worked at what's called, so I was the first female design engineer ever hired to a company called Duncan Metering. And Thomas Duncan is a famous inventor, and he has an entire lab at Purdue University named after him. And so I was a research and development engineer, and of course, all the commercial industrial meters were assembled in the company. And every single job was moved to Mexico. And so many of them never worked again. And so I spent the rest of my career basically trying to help people write better resumes, get a job, get a promotion, mentor other, you know, young women. And, during 2007, 2008, 2009, when we had, the big recession here in the United States, Austin had some of the lowest unemployment rates in the entire country. And yet during that time, there were people who were unemployed, who had good education, but were unemployed for so long that their homes were foreclosed on. They couldn't afford health insurance for their family. And I realized that this is a challenge for many middle class and even upper middle class people who have all the resources and the tools to be successful in life. You could work 40, 50, 60 hours a week for decades, and all of a sudden you lose your job and you have no health insurance. You don't know how you're going to pay your rent. It is a huge challenge for the majority of people who work for a living in our country. So about 5 or 6 or 7 years ago, I joined a nonprofit which was challenged with fundraising. We raised tens of thousands of dollars. We grew that nonprofit to a 4,000 member nonprofit. I was elected to president, and that nonprofit provides free training and education to anybody who wants it. And that is when I realized that we can do much more, that we need to take these solutions to the rest of the world, and, as you know, to the rest of our country. And if you look at, my background, I spent my career solving complicated problems. For example, my products are used by millions of people around the world, computer products, and microprocessors are used in everything from a washing machine to a jet airplane. We have amazing ability to solve these problems. And what I realized is I need to get off my couch. We can do more. We can bring these solutions to Congress, and we can solve these problems in a very, very cost-effective way. That's what got me off my couch. That's what's got me running for office.
Something that you said is very similar to my own history as a nonprofit activist. I have founded nonprofit organizations. I have worked up close and personal, just as you have described in your own life, with people who were living through circumstances of great difficulty. But I came to understand, as clearly you did as well, that no amount of private charity can compensate for a basic lack of social justice, that most of these people are living at the effect of bad public policy. So as long as these bad public policies exist, such as tax and trade policies which ship jobs overseas, such as lack of health care and so forth, then all they're going to be doing is dropping in the laps of churches, of synagogues, of mosques, of nonprofit organizations, the despair and the suffering of so many people who should not be suffering as they are. So you are going, and I want everybody to hear me when I say this, this means to me that you're going to Congress for the right reason. And I think not enough people are going to Congress, or to the White House for that matter, for the right reason. And I'm sure that everybody who hears you on the campaign trail feels from you, Donna, what I feel and what I'm sure everybody watching tonight feels. And that's your heart. You are there to serve people, and that's what matters. Okay, you're doing well. You're getting close, right? Your name is out there. It's a real race. I saw on Twitter or something on social media tonight how you've placed your signs, or somebody's placed your sign somewhere. Then you come by the next day, somebody took the signs down. I was living in Grosse Pointe, Michigan during the run-up to the Iraq War. And my housemate and I both felt very strongly about the United States not going into Iraq. And we had a sizable front yard, and we would put up no war signs every single day, maybe like 10 of them. And every morning they'd been taken down, which I just think is so, talk about un-American. Your people aren't taking down Mr. Carter, right? Representative Carter, is that his name? We're not taking down his signs. So we know there are some people who don't want you to win, but there are a lot of people there who do want you to win. I want everybody to remember that her website is votefordonna.com, and any dollar that you donate to her campaign will help her. Let's talk about why that is. Because she needs TV ads, or she needs ads on the internet. She needs written material. She needs.
I have even a better answer, by the way. Remember, you started this show off and you said that John Carter did not, vote to fund the USPS.
Yes.
Every single dollar you donate to our campaign today will go directly to cover postage for mail pieces. It will go directly to the USPS. So you are not only helping our campaign, you're also helping the USPS directly. So that's a 2-for-1 right there. And you know,
but it just happens to be true what you're saying.
And you know, the signs that are being cut down as we put them up, it's not only just un-American. This is, people talk about the Constitution and our First Amendment rights. We're the envy of the world. So if you really believe in our First Amendment and the Constitution, it is completely against that when you take down someone's signs. And if you want to win, and you want to win on merit, you want to win on, here's what I'm going to do versus what's Donna's going to do. Let's not win on, you know, trying to take down someone's signs against the First Amendment. It makes absolutely no sense.
Also, what you just said about the envy of the world, I don't believe we're the envy of the world today. Our Constitution is the envy of the world, but unfortunately, I think in many ways we're the pity of the world right now, and for good reason. Okay, so you win. You make this race this next month, this 40 some odd days, you make it, and we know you can. And the whole world goes, oh my God, did you see what happened in Texas? And it's exciting, and a lot of it's women, and we're all excited. Okay, you get there. What are you gonna do?
Well, first of all, I want your viewers to know how close this race is. This race is one of the most competitive races, not just in Texas, in the entire country, just 2.9% from flipping blue. So that was just 8,000 votes in 2018, 8,000 votes. Now, here's the thing. Since 2018 November, we had more than 65,000 young people, young families with children move in to this district. These people tend to vote Democrat. They believe in democratic values. They believe in the platform that we are running with. So not only do we have an amazing chance to flip a red district blue, and always red district blue, and bring representation to Austin, which is completely gerrymandered, which means they took Austin, they sliced it into 6 pieces. I have all of Northwest Austin and all of the Northwest Austin suburbs, and it goes all the way north to Killeen, where we have Fort Hood, the largest armored vehicle military base in our entire country. That is my district. And this district can be won easy. Now, how did I come up with my platform? In January of 2019, I quit my job. One of the things a lot of people don't know about me is I'm an engineer, but I'm also a research engineer, and I'm a product researcher, product manager. So I have extensive background in researching, and I tried to apply that. And for 6 months, I went all over this district to all the cities and talked to people, partisan, nonpartisan, Lions clubs, Rotary clubs, Democratic clubs, moms clubs, anybody who would tell me what their needs were and how we could solve them. And after listening to this district, came up with my platform of healthcare for all, education for all, real pay for all, and equal justice for all. That is the platform that I am running on. And I believe that that is a platform that not only that our country needs, but is also a very financially astute way of bringing the solutions that we Democrats believe is the morally right thing to do. I love to say that I am bringing the financial case for what we believe is the morally right thing to do.
As we shift, which we desperately need to do, society's bottom line, from an economic bottom line to a humanitarian bottom line, our policies will no longer be guided by the notion of short-term profitability for huge multinational corporate interests, but rather our policies will be guided by the question, what would help people thrive? And that which helps people thrive helps people to soar, helps people to spread their wings, helps people to start businesses, help people to get educated, help people to make more money, helps people to be happy at work, helps people to be happy employers and employees, have happy families. That creates abundance, including economic abundance. So I think we need to take a stand for the fact that the humanitarian economics is the more abundant economics. It is not the economics where 1% controls 90% of all the wealth, but where there's an even distribution of hope and possibility, and then people do with that what they want. So I agree with you. That's a message that people want to hear and that people are hearing right now. Now, you talked about healthcare, you talked about education, you talked about justice. Today was a deep disappointment for many of us because of the decision of the grand jury in the Breonna Taylor case. So I think that there's a lot of people right now are saying, what was the decision? The decision is that one of the officers, only one of the officers was indicted, and that was for what's called wanton endangerment. So basically, no one was indicted for anything close to manslaughter, murder, homicide, anything along that line. So a lot of people are very frustrated. So your ideas about equal justice, I'm sure, would be very interesting for a lot of people. So let us know your thoughts about that.
Yeah, and this officer, he wasn't even indicted for, his actions against Breonna Taylor. He was indicted for shooting at another apartment. Yes, yeah. Exactly. So before George Floyd, before Breonna Taylor, back in 2019, when we launched our campaign, we launched it with something called Equal Justice for All. It's a 2-page paper that you can go on my website and read. It's 3 minutes long, votefordonna.com. And there were ideas in there that we have been promoting well before all the protests broke around the entire country, right? In all 50 states. Americans across our country came together to stand with Black Americans against the injustice. And this injustice, by the way, is not just in law enforcement, but it is in education, it is in healthcare, it is in jobs, it is every single place you look at. So what Equal Justice for All does is says, look, right now, what we have is our policemen in our neighborhoods, okay, have less strict guidelines than our troops in war zones. That is completely illogical. That makes absolutely no sense. We have a police force that is focused on things that don't make the matter better. What I'm saying is that we need to focus training on de-escalation. Police training should be focused on de-escalating, number one. Number two, policemen today, they might have complaints against them. They may be fired from their job for something like what happened with Breonna Taylor. But right after that event happens, they can go on to the next town, the next city, the next state, and get reemployed all over again. Yes. Yes. So what I'm proposing is that policemen should be required to carry liability insurance. We should require them to carry liability insurance. And there is a good precedent set for that in the physicians, sector, where it has worked very well. And that way, when a city or town is trying to employ a police officer and they go purchase this liability insurance on their behalf, they wouldn't be able to. It would not be possible to purchase something that's reasonable, and they would find out that this person has complaints or has been, terminated for cause, and they would not be able to be rehired. So that's one of the things that I am proposing in Equal Justice for All.
Wouldn't that just be effectuated by a national registry, and that kind of one strike you're out? If you take actions that are so transgressive against basic human decency codes within the police force, you go get a job doing something else because you're not working as a policeman anymore.
It's true, but here's what liability insurance does. It also protects taxpayers from civil lawsuits, because every single time, there's a civil lawsuit brought by a family that's been wronged, then guess who pays that bill? We do. We pay that bill every single time. So liability insurance does more than just protect, police officers being rehired. It also protects us and our taxpayer money that we work so hard for. Remember, Americans who work for a living create every single dollar of wealth in this country.
I understand. And that's what our tax money is. And we have, I've been thinking recently, why is it that we have so strayed from the notion that it's good to help people? Our tax money, the Treasury of the United States is our money. And it's less and less. Years ago, corporate taxes paid up to 33% of that money. Now, corporate taxes only pay 11% of the public treasury. And yet so much of our money in the public treasury goes to serving them, those who give 11% of that money. It's kind of nutty. It's wrong and it's immoral. And I think that we need to remember that when the government, quote unquote, gives money to people, it's giving them their money. That's why when we talk about things like universal health care, we're paying for it anyway. But the idea that we should be ashamed that the government is serving people, it's such a complete inversion of the principles really that made this country great. We are theoretically, in the words of Abraham Lincoln, to be a government of the people, by the people, and for the people, not of, by, and for corporations. Donna, we have a couple of women who would like to ask you questions. Is it okay with you that I bring them on?
Sure.
Okay. The first one is Joanne Reyes. Joanne, come on and join us and unmute yourself and you'll get a chance to talk to Donna. Hi, how are you?
I'm well, thank you.
Where do you live, Joanne?
I live in Austin, Texas.
You live in Austin. I've lived there myself, a great city.
Yeah.
Okay, so here is Donna, hopefully your soon-to-be representative. What questions do you have for her?
I wanted to ask about single-payer health care. One of the questions I know people ask is, how are we going to pay for it? What would that look like? So could you address that? How will we pay for it?
Yeah, so first of all, that question has absolutely no basis in reality. Here's the reality for you. In 2018, we, the American people, paid $3.65 trillion, $3.65 trillion for healthcare in this country. That left out more than 80 million people with no health insurance, never mind the people that had health insurance. They couldn't even go see a doctor when they needed to. So more than 80 million people had no health care, rather. Some of them did have health insurance, but because their deductibles and premiums are so high, they couldn't even go see a doctor when they are sick. Okay. Now you might be saying, okay, got it. That's how much we paid. So what does that mean? Like, how do we pay for it? If you look at the studies on single payer healthcare, which is also commonly referred to as Medicare for all, you will see that there are at least a dozen think tanks, organizations that have done research on single payer healthcare. And even the Koch brothers, who are in the right-wing side of politics, as right as you can go, they all agree that single payer healthcare would only cost our country, all of us, no more than something between $2 trillion and $3 trillion. So we are overpaying right now in a huge way, because last I checked, $3.65 trillion is way more than $3 trillion. So bottom line is, we are already overpaying for healthcare in this country. Number two, what I am proposing with my healthcare for all is to build on Medicare for all. Meaning, how do you accelerate Medicare for all and how do you make it cheaper? And one of the things that the American people may not be aware of is that we have a major lack of primary care physicians in our country. And the reason is student loans. When you go to school and you have huge mortgage-sized student loans, so instead of practicing primary care, what do? You specialize. And so because we have a lack of primary care physicians, because we don't focus on preventative care, and by the way, during the coronavirus, months, what did we see? We saw Black Americans, Latino Americans, Hispanic Americans, especially in Texas, be disproportionately impacted. They were more in hospitals, and they died more from coronavirus because they had underlying conditions. You have to ask yourself, why did they have all these underlying conditions? Well, when you don't go to see the doctor for decades, you don't go see a primary care physician, then you build up these underlying conditions, and that's where the cost goes up. So today in our country, we use the emergency room as our front line of defense. And that has got to stop. So guess what happens when you have people up there say, yeah, but I don't want to pay for the illegals. Guess what? Whether you're illegal or not in this country, whether you're undocumented or not in this country, when you get sick, when you cannot go see a primary care physician because you don't have an established doctor-patient relationship, you go to the ER. And when you go to the ER and you're unable to pay that, even if you're 20 years old, young and healthy, and you went skiing and you broke your leg and you file for bankruptcy, guess what? The hospital still gets paid. Who pays for it? We all do. And we all pay for it with our deductibles and our premiums. And that's why they go up every single year. So bottom line is, the question is not, how are we going to pay for it? The question is, we are already overpaying for it, but we're not getting the services that we are paying for. And that's the truth.
And also, we're so selective when we ask that question. What about the $2 trillion 2017, I think, tax cut, where 86 cents of every dollar went to the very richest Americans? How are we going to pay for it? Well, we're going to pay for it because they're going to create so many jobs, and that's going to lift all boats, which is patently untrue. It's never been true. And how we pay now, what we should ask ourselves is the human price we're paying. Human suffering, people who are dying earlier than they should die, people who are suffering in ways that they shouldn't, people who can't afford the medicine that they need, who can't afford the pain pills that they need when they're suffering from serious chronic pain. So there's a human price, a human cost when we say, how do we pay for it? We're paying with our blood, we're paying with our suffering.
And by the way, I want to point out that today in the United States, we just exceeded the 200,000
Coronavirus
that have died. Imagine in the last 7 months, being a family that had to go through a funeral in the middle of a pandemic. We're not talking about 5,000, 10,000 people. We're talking about 200,000 families that went through a funeral that many of them, most of them could not say goodbye to their loved one, even in person. They could not hug them. They could not hold their hand. They had to do it over a computer or FaceTime.
It's embarrassing, really, that, you know, we were all raised to think we were the most powerful nation in the world. We're still the most economically powerful. However, when you look at how other countries have handled the coronavirus pandemic, we should have looked at what other countries were doing. We should have used the best practices from all over the country. We should have used the best practices that were suggested by our own CDC, by our own scientists, and the fact that we have a president who didn't want to do that. And he didn't want to do that, first of all, because he didn't want to make it like it was a big deal. Because even though people were suffering and people were dying, he thought that the more of a big deal it seemed to be, the less would be his chances for re-election, and the less would be his chances for the reemergence of the economy the way he thinks the economy should be. But also the horror of the fact that this was a conscious decision. You know, I read an interview the other day about Jared Kushner. And at the time that the coronavirus story became a big deal, there was a lot of pressure on the president. People were begging him to pass the defense manufacturing bill that would allow him to tell manufacturers, this is not about the free market, guys. We need you to make this much PPE. We need you to make this many masks. We need you to make this much equipment. It's not a question of letting the market do it. It's a question of knowing that this is the overwhelming need, just like Roosevelt said to the car manufacturers. You're not going to sell any cars until I get the amount of tanks I need. You're not going to sell any cars until I get the number of airplanes I need. You're not going to sell any cars until I have the number of ships I need. After World War II, it wasn't a question. The free market came second. The marketplace came second to the overriding needs of the American people. And in this interview, we're saying that Kushner said, no, we don't do it. We will not mess with the markets. And I think personally that there are so many companies that would have been willing, and definitely so many workers who would have been proud to put their skills to the task of making enough protective gear, making enough masks, et cetera. It is so immoral. It is so wrong. And as you've made very, very clear, it has cost hundreds of thousands of lives. So we have to do some major rethink about what matters. And if the health of our fellow citizens and of ourselves is not what matters, what do we have a government for?
Not only that, you know, it made the economy worse. Since instead of using the small time we had for the shutdown and utilizing that to make sure that we had all the safety, you know, safety in place, and we had the PPE in place, and we had the contact tracing in place, and we had the testing ramped up, and so they prolonged that. And by the way, opening up the economy is not going to bring back the economy. If people don't feel safe, if people are still dying, and cases are still increasing in Texas, by the way, right now, you're not going to go out to a restaurant. You're not going to go to a movie theater. So they've actually made the economy a lot worse than it would have if they had actually paid attention to this. And remember, the first part of this, the first 3-4 months of the pandemic, even in Texas through June and July, the GOP governor kept on promoting that, you know, you don't have to wear a mask. He used, you know, small businesses to police masks until they realized that there were so many people in the hospitals, in the ER and the ICU. Then they all of a sudden were like, okay, now you have to use masks. And you see these GOP senators that are shameless running ads on TV now wearing masks after 14,000 Texas families had to go through a funeral. Now they're wearing masks.
Right. And of course, one of the issues that has been most important to me is how, according to their idea of reopening the economy, it was necessary to send these children back to school. So we have sent children back to school before we had any reasonable guarantee that it was safe to do so, without the Senate being willing to give the money that was necessary to the school districts in order to create the conditions of greater safety for the children, as has been done in other countries. Now we are seeing a lot of children getting the virus and the government's refusing to do national monitoring, just in case the people would actually know what was going on there. I don't think we're going to know for months, possibly even longer, what kind of price we're paying in human terms with letting our children go back to school. But as you said, Donna, that's what they thought was necessary to send people back to work. If we had direct cash relief, like in England, everybody gets 80% of their salary. The Americans have gotten is the one-time $1,200 payment, some increase in employment. We don't even get that anymore. And people could be getting money, stay home. But you know what? Even when they were staying home, they would be spending that money. They would be spending that money on rent. They would be spending that money on food. They would be spending on money on things that would actually drive a survivable and thrivable economy. The whole thing is so rotten, is so corrupt. And what we need are people like you, Donna, who are going to go in there and take them on. Are you okay, Joanne? You have anything else you want to add?
I only that
Get your vote?
only that I really appreciate the thoroughness of your response. I have 100% confidence in your ability to really represent our folks here in Austin, and it just all the logic and sanity and compassion in your voice is really is refreshing. And yes, you have my support, so I thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Joanne. I really appreciate your question.
Donna, there's another woman, and her name is Rebecca Riddell. Okay, so Rebecca, if you'd like to join us, unmute yourself. Rebecca Riddell has, that's Joanne again. We're waiting for Rebecca. Wendy, do you have her? High-tech operation here. You'll have to fix all this when you get to Congress. Hi, Rebecca. How are you?
I'm great. Sorry to disappear on you.
Don't be silly. Welcome. Are you in Austin also?
I'm actually in Brooklyn, but I'm Austin born and raised, and all my family's still there. So I care a lot about these issues.
Cool. Okay. You've got Donna Imam here. Ask her whatever question that you want.
Great. First of all, thank you to both of you. This is, really great to hear. I wanted to ask about student loan debt. I understand that part of your platform is reducing education so that people can graduate debt-free, which I completely agree is a huge priority, especially for young people. But I also wonder, how would you assist people like me and the many Americans who have significant student loan debt, which continues to grow and sort of holds people back from progressing in their life? So, yeah.
Yeah, so first of all, what I want people to understand is the student loan industry and student loan debt that we have in this country is a Ponzi scheme. It is a scam. There is no other way to define it. And let me explain to you first why it's
a scam. You say that on the floor of the US Congress. I want you to say that. This is a scam.
It is a scam. And I want people to understand why it's a scam. It's not just a saying, right? If you look at the cost of education over the last 3 to 4 decades and how it's increased compared to wages and benefits and our living expenses, it has gone up thousands of percent, not 5%, 10%, 15%, thousands of percent. Now, if your wages don't go up thousands of percent, how can you justify education, the cost of education going up 1,000%? Well, teachers aren't getting paid, thousands of percent more. Buildings don't cost thousands of percent more to make. So where is this cost coming from? This cost is completely artificially manufactured by student loan companies. What student loan companies decided was, hey, let's saddle up young people with huge loans and then let universities say, hey, we're not going to leave any money on the table. We'll make them pay interest for the rest of their lives because these guys are going to go get a job, and every single month we're going to get a payment from them, and it's recurring what's called revenue, recurring revenue. So they got together with our United States Congress, which is completely bought out by corporate interests, and said, hey, we want you to put this law in place where student loans, you can't even file bankruptcy. You can't even file bankruptcy. Do you know there are only two other ways that you cannot get out of paying your money? One is taxes. You have to pay your taxes. You can't file bankruptcy. And guess what? They made sure they made student loans that much important, where you would be in debt for the rest of your life. So that is why it's a scam. I want you guys to understand why it is a scam. It is a manufactured problem, number one. Number two, what I believe that current student loan holders should be able to do is we should forgive the student loan. But there's a but. I'm not saying that we take taxpayer money and forgive the student loan. What I'm saying is that these student loan companies should be put out of business and said, listen, when someone takes a $30,000 loan and after paying $40,000 into it over years, still having another $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 loans, that's ridiculous. You've gotten what you loaned, you've gotten interest payment on that. Now it's your time to go find a different business and really make proper profit by giving value. You are no longer putting value in this. So what I'm saying is that the United States government should not just forgive this loan for people and then pay it off with our taxpayer money. They should forgive this loan. They should allow people to file bankruptcy if they want, but they should also take these student loan companies and make sure that they don't just get away with trillions of dollars, literally billions and trillions of dollars of interest payment that they do not deserve. No value has been given. And by the way, universities should be held accountable. Universities should be held accountable. You can't just come in and say your education has cost this much. You have to be held accountable, because there are universities around the country, including my alma mater, Purdue University, that year over year has either kept tuition at a standstill, so tuition has not increased, or they have increased tuition without decreasing the quality of education. So it can be done, and that's what I would do for people who already have student loans.
I'm not sure you could legislate some of what you just did in terms of legislating companies, but I certainly hear you and certainly agree with the sentiment. We have $1.5 trillion college loan debt, which is human beings' lives. I can't even imagine what it would be to be in your 20s. Excuse me. I can't even imagine what it would be to be in your 20s and have tens of thousands of dollars of loan debt, sometimes even more than that. And I have heard the most poignant and even just heartbreaking stories from people who took out these loans to get an education in order to pursue the kind of job and career that they want. But then they find that even though they got the education, they're so loaded with this loan debt that they're afraid to even go after that kind of a career, but because they feel that they have to go after the kind of job that would be more likely to pay off those college loan debts that they took out for another career. And, the whole point is that we should be helping people soar, but particularly our young people. This is our future. And so much of governmental policy today, instead of aiding people in living their dreams, is actually suppressing the capacity of people to live their dreams. And I love the spirit with which you take that on. I love the spirit with which you say it like it is. And I personally believe we're all going to be better off when you're on the floor of the US House of Representatives talking that way. Rebecca, how'd she do for you? How'd she do?
That's great. I mean, I think that kind of message really resonates with me and with the many, many people like me who it's a big deal for us in our everyday to be saddled with this kind of debt. It shapes our lives. And so I think, I want to echo what Joanne said about just, really feeling grateful for your clarity on this. And I'm all in. It's great. So thank you.
I want to say one last thing about education, right? We are one of the most technologically, advanced countries in the entire world. We have some of the smartest people. Technology should be driving down the cost of education to nothing. When I say nothing, I mean nothing. And I believe right now what we should have is colleges, universities competing to bring the best degrees at the lowest cost. They should compete to lower the cost also. There's many things we can do to incentivize them to compete for federal dollars, especially state schools. By the way, there are schools that have done that, where Georgia Tech, for example, you can get a computer science degree, a master's for, less than $15,000, around that amount. And with that degree, you can do a lot with it. Bottom line is, the cost of education is inflated, it's artificial, and it's something that Congress just needs to do.
Everybody, I hope that you will be going to voteForDonna.com and hitting that donate button. You have heard tonight already a lot from Donna, as you've heard from so many of the people who have been interviewing, all of them actually, at the Progressive Candidate Summit. I hear too much whining. I hear too much bitching and moaning about the government because it's doing terrible things. Yeah, you're right, it is. But it's our responsibility as citizens. And I think a large part of what's happening in this country, both with Congress and clearly with the president as well, is that we need, many of us, to take responsibility for the fact that it was our own political disengagement that allowed a lot of these things to happen. This is the time to be engaged. And that means more than just talking about it on social media. There are two things here. First of all, if you go to Donna's website, votefordonna.com, they can use you for phone banking, no matter where you are. Say, I want to volunteer. If you live in Texas, great. If you live in Williamson County, if you live in District 31, great. But even if you don't, you can say, how can I help you on the phone? And they'll put you to work. And the other issue is money. $5, $10, $15, whatever it is. Know that.
And I want to remind everybody again, remember, every single dollar that you donate tonight, every single dollar will go to the USPS. That's a promise from me.
I love that.
Yep. You get to help our campaign, you get our message. And by the way, every single time we get our message to our voters in our district, we win. We showed that in the primary. We are here after beating 11 Democratic candidates, okay? And in the runoff, I beat our runoff opponent by 13 points. It wasn't slim. Our message is resonating because we did the research. We talked to the people in our district. We understand the people in our district. I know my district. I know exactly who lives here. I know what their needs are because I've talked to them. I spent 6 months researching, and now we need to give them this message that your vote counts. This race is close. 8,000 votes. We have 65,000 more people that have moved in since 2018. We can win this. We can win it big. We can bring representation, and we can bring financially solid, financially astute solutions to all of these problems: healthcare, education, high-wage jobs, equal justice. That's what we're going to go do in Congress.
Well, your energy is amazing, Donna. I'm sure other people watching and people in your district feel like I do, which is okay, I'll vote for you.
Come out and vote. Yeah.
Thank you, Rebecca.
We're going to win this, and we're going to win this big if you come out and vote. That's all. That's between us and you representation.
Yeah. Well, Donna, you've got it going on. You're saying the right things. From my politics, you certainly are. You have the energy that we need. We need more women in Congress. We need more people with the level of passion that you have for that which would actually serve the people, rather than just increase profitability for multinational corporate interests. I hope that everybody who is watching tonight will go to votefordonna.com and give this woman the opportunity that she needs. These are the last, what, Donna, 40 days, 41, 40
Yep.
something days.
Three weeks, just under 3 weeks, and early voting starts. We need to communicate with voters now. So if you can't donate, a phone bank for us. And even if you can't donate big, even if you donate $1, by the way, I say that if you can't donate 25, you can't donate 10, you can't donate 5, donate 1, because it says, Donna, I might not be able to give you money, but I see you. I see your platform. I see what you're doing. I see what you're going to do for us and how you're going to represent me and my district and my state and my country. Because remember, when U.S. Congress candidates, candidates for U.S. congressional districts go to Congress, they legislate for the entire country. So it doesn't matter where you are in this country, you are sending someone that's going to be able to speak for solutions. And we are tired of politicians being completely bought out, legislation being written by lobbyists and Congress people signing on the bottom line. That's got to stop. And the way we stop it is we get involved in our own democracy. We bring our solutions, because you know what? We've risen to every challenge, okay? Whether it was Hurricane Harvey, neighbors help neighbors escape that, whether it was, Black Americans being, under police brutality, we got up and we said, enough is enough, okay? We can do this and we can get it done for this entire country. And we have more than enough wealth, more than enough money to pay for it all.
I think you're great, Donna. I hope that you picked up, I know that you picked up some new fans tonight. I hope you picked up some new financial supporters tonight. I wish you the very, very best. And I truly can say to you with deep honesty and from my heart, this country will be better if you're in the House of Representatives. And I totally see it happening. I think you have a great future ahead. Thank you very,
so much,
very much.
Marianne. I really appreciate it.
You're so welcome, honey. Thank you so much. And so, everybody, I want to thank you for the nights that you spent with us. I think feel so fondly towards all of the candidates that have been with us as part of the Progressive Candidate Summit over these last few months. Some of them won their primaries and some of them unfortunately did not, but all of them were great. And even those who did not win their primary, I see great things up ahead for them, especially those who they lost last time, but they're coming back roaring this time. Even with Donna, her opponent has been in Congress since 2003. He's a big ally of the president. The president has endorsed him. So you know what he supports. And then you heard tonight what Donna supports. If you say what Donna supports is the vision of America that you want, then I hope that you will financially support her. Not only can you go to vote for Donna, but remember, if you go to progressivecandidatesummit.com, some of you are watching me now on that site, some of you in other places. If you go to progressivecandidatesummit.com, you will see our endorsement page and you will see a way that you can support all of the candidates who are still running, who we have endorsed. And some people are just saying, okay, $10 for each one, whatever works for you. I want to thank you. I also want to thank Helen Caddis and Wendy Zoller, who have done all the real hard lifting technologically to give us all this opportunity to be together, to talk with these candidates. As I've said before, I think a lot of times people are not interested in politics. They think it's whatever they think it is, in large part because they haven't experienced enough. They haven't talked enough to these candidates. They don't know that these are real living, breathing people. And every time you see something the US government does in either domestic or international policy that makes you horrified, know there was somebody who tried to run for that seat that would have done something different. And in many cases, it was because they didn't have enough money to stay in the game. We need public funding of federal campaigns. Right now, because of particularly now with the unfortunate passing of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, the makeup of the Supreme Court is such that it is not reasonable to assume that we will be able to overturn Citizens United via Supreme Court action anytime soon. But there are other things that we can do, including a constitutional amendment to create public funding for federal campaigns. That's a process, that's a journey. In the meantime, what do we need to do? We need to pay. We need to do what we can. And it doesn't have to be outside your comfort zone. If everybody who feels inspired by these kinds of candidates gives what is comfortable for you, and even as Donna said, even if that's $1, I know when I was running, I would see those $1 come in and those $5. I remember once somebody who said, here's $10, and when I get paid again, I'll send another 10. It meant a lot to me. Some of the winning candidacies, people such as the Bernie Sanders campaign and all the wins he had, it was, I think, something like a $27 average donation. And I don't need to tell anyone the race is on. I don't think this is just the most important election in our lifetime. I think this is the most important election in American history. I don't think that we have had a moment of such peril since the Civil War. And I think in many ways we are experiencing at least the beginnings of a cold civil war. It's a somber moment in many ways. One of the things I love about Donna and all of the people that have been interviewed here and that I've been able to host on the Progressive Candidate Summit, I love their enthusiasm. I love that they're out there. I know what it's like to run. I know how exhilarating it is, and I know how brutal it is. I know what they're going through. And we did this so that we could do our bit to help them, to send them whatever we can, whether it's calling and saying, I want a phone bank for you, whether it's giving financially or whatever. Show up. Your country needs you. I don't think it's ever been truer to say that. I'm voting for Joe Biden. I and voting against giving Donald Trump a second term. I find some of what his administration has done truly horrifying, truly undermining of the great tenets of our democracy, of our Constitution, and of the norms that truly do make this country great. I'm also very concerned because everything that he has done that I do not approve of was done him holding back. You give him a second term, there will be no holding back. He has created a situation called agency capture, where he has replaced some of the independent agencies of the US government with lackeys who now direct those departments, whether it has to do with the Department of Justice, whether it has to do with the CDC and the FDA, whether it has to do with the Post Office, whether it has to do with Department of Education. People who are there in many ways, not so much to truly create, support the vital functioning of those departments, so much as to serve the will of Donald Trump, even when that means a desecration of the real foundations of those agencies. This is a national emergency. This is a moment of national peril, as I said. But we've had moments of peril before. And our historical trend is that when America sways from the better angels of our nature, that we self-correct. We had slavery, but then we had abolition. We had the institutionalized suppression of women, but then we had women's suffrage in the passage of the 19th Amendment. We had segregation, institutionalized suppression of Black people in America, and then we had the Civil Rights Movement, the Civil Rights Act, and the Voting Rights Act. Every generation has its struggle. Even with the Voting Rights Act, giving universal guarantee of voting rights, they started chipping away at that several years ago. Now we're back to an age of voter suppression. But other generations have taken on those forces, overreach by capitalism when capitalism itself had lost its soul and deviated from the moral and ethical responsibility to people and to planet that should be its core guidance, just like it should be the core guidance of every individual and every institution. Our ancestors have pushed back, not only against slavery, not only against suppression of women, not only against segregation, they pushed back against all manner of overreach by forces that would suppress rather than liberate the American people. That's why we have labor unions. That's why we have child labor laws. That's why we had antitrust legislation. And this is a struggle that appears over and over and over again. It began in our own founding. In 1776, when our founders signed the Declaration of Independence, which contained the most enlightened and aspirational principles that had ever formed the core of the founding of a nation, all of us realized 41 of those 56 signers were slave owners. So that contest, that struggle between the angels of our better nature and these aspirational principles versus forces in our country which would transgress against those principles, sometimes in the most violent ways, that struggle has always been there. It's baked into the cake. It's part of America's DNA. It's a bipolar aspect of the American consciousness. And what we're experiencing in our country today is simply the newest iteration of this. It's back. But other generations have taken it on. Other generations have risen to the occasion. Other generations have pushed back and put this country back on track. Let's not be the first generation of Americans to wimp out on doing what it takes to take this country back to its soul, back to its heart, back to the principles of democracy and liberty and justice that we say we believe in, and that we purport to stand on. Those principles are in peril. That's okay though, because we're here. Let's show them what we've got. Let's do everything we can between now and November 3rd by supporting candidates who do stand for another way, another option. Even if it's somebody that you don't totally support, but you know that it is counter to the agenda that we know in our hearts is wrong. If nothing else, to give us a time to regroup, give the possibility a break in the action. Let's break the free fall that is going on in our country right now. Democracy needs us. And when we do this, we will be able to regroup on the other side of this election. We will be able to once again harness the angels of our better nature, harness the powers of our decency, the power of our dignity, and the power of our intelligence, and the power of our patriotism. And then this country will, on the other side of all this, not only survive and not only thrive. I believe in my heart, at the end of all this, we'll be better than ever. Thank you so much. Go to the progressivecandidatesummit.com. Do what you can to help these wonderful candidates get where they need to go. They're working hard, and let's support them so they can support us. Thank you so much. Stay with me on social media, whatever. I'll be starting a podcast towards the end of next month. Got some other cool things that we're cooking up, and I'll let you know. In the meantime, I thank you from the bottom of my heart for joining with me. We're American, and we can do this. Much love. Bye-bye.